The Prime Minister affirm the Labour government's commitment to maintaining funding for public services such as housing, universities, police and law and order, transport and pensions, and reject the Tory party policy of 10% across-the-board cuts, which would take this country back to the worst days of Thatcherism.
So it looks pretty clear which way we're going with this Prime Minister's questions.
Specifically, the Shadow Health Secretary said this morning, over 3 years after 2011, a 10% reduction in the departmental expenditure limits for other departments. It is a very tough spending requirement indeed, he said. And he said the job of the Shadow Chancellor is to be clear about where the spending restraint bites. There can be no doubt that the choice, whenever it comes, is between a government that is prepared to invest in the future and a Conservative Party that is going to cut.
Now David Cameron.
When even the old-timers are reading out the whip's handout questions, that's when you know things are really bad for the government. Can I first of all say how pleased I am to see the Prime Minister in his place? Let me be clear, Mr. Speaker, about what we think of electoral reform. We want to keep the existing system. We support the link between one MP and one constituency, and we back our system because you can throw out weak, tired and discredited governments. And let me say, we supported this system when we were behind, when we were ahead, when we won, when we lost. So can I ask the Prime Minister, why has he suddenly discovered an interest in changing the electoral system? Does it have anything to do with the fact that his party got 15% of the vote last week?
Mr. Speaker, finally, after many, many weeks, a question on policy. Isn't it remarkable it has taken this time for the Conservatives to come up with a question? The statement I will make in a few minutes after 12:30 will deal with exactly these problems. I have to remind them that with the Conservative Party's support in many cases, there are different electoral systems in different parts of the United Kingdom. There's a different one in Northern Ireland, a different one in Scotland, a different one in Wales, a different one for the European Parliament, which is proportional representation, and a different one in the House of Commons. But I will deal with this issue in the constitutional statement in a few minutes.
There he goes, Lee. Oh, my apologies.
Speaker rushing on a bit too fast there. David Cameron's got another 5 questions to come.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure, Mr. Speaker, you would agree. It's no good saying wait for the statement when he's briefed all the details out to the press. And I have to say, in asking questions about personalities, what is there left to ask when so many members of the Cabinet walked out because they can't work with him? I want to ask the Prime Minister questions about the issue of electoral reform and also about the process he intends to follow. On the issue, does he agree with me that a truly proportional system has massive drawbacks? Didn't we see this on Sunday night when the BNP, a bunch of fascist thugs, got 2 members elected to the European Parliament? Does he agree with me that is a very, very strong argument against proportional systems?
Mr. Speaker, let the whole House send the message that the politics of discrimination and prejudice and bigotry have no part to play in the democratic life of our country. And let us all take action together to expose the racist and bigoted policies of the British National Party. And let us be clear that on this side of the House, we will do everything in our power to show that the problems that made people vote for the BNP are problems that we are dealing with on housing and on social justice and employment. But nobody will support the anti-Semitic and the policy of the BNP that is even against mixed-race marriage. Now, I believe that the whole country can unite on this. What I say about electoral reform, however, is that I have never myself supported the policy of proportional representation for a Westminster Parliament. That has always been my view. He has to accept that the policy of proportional representation exists for the European elections. I don't see a proposal from his party to change it at the moment. But he also has got to accept that the Jenkins proposals that contained policies for AV plus PR laid down a criteria by which it would be impossible for the British National Party to have held a seat even on the PR system in the British Parliament unless they won a constituency seat.
Mr. Cameron.
Everyone will agree with what the Prime Minister says about defeating the BNP, and it does mean all mainstream parties making sure they go door to door and they get their voters to go out and vote. Let me ask about the process. Let us be clear about what the Prime Minister seems to be considering. We are in the 5th and final year of a Parliament. There have been reports that a referendum on electoral reform is being considered for before the general election. Can the Prime Minister confirm those reports? Is that something he's considering?
No plans for that. And let me just say, when he hears the statement later, he will hear that there is an interest throughout the country in what happens to electoral reform. We published a review. Well, I'm sorry. We published a review on the issue of electoral reform only a few months ago. That has led to a serious debate in the country. But we are not putting proposals forward today. And if I may say so, I said he had moved on to policy, but there seems to be an element of self-interest in the way that he is approaching policy. Is it not strange? Is it not strange? Is it not strange? Is it not strange, Mr. Speaker?
Conservatives have a bit of a laugh because I think Gordon Brown was trying to do exactly what he's accused them of. Speaker intervening.
I'm not getting much help from the Chief Whip.
A quick go at Patrick McLaughlin as the Conservative Chief Whip.
I can tell the Chief Whip to be quiet, but the Prime Minister must be heard. Prime Minister.
Is it not strange they're not even interested in discussing? They're not even interested in discussing this democratic reform. But also, Mr. Speaker, that the first questions he asks about policy are not about the economy, not about the health service, not about education, not about public services, not about the issues that the public out there know that we and they are concerned about.
I have to say to the Prime Minister, it's remarks like that make him a figure of ridicule across this country. Everyone is entitled to ask what the Prime Minister's motive is. For 12 years, not a squeak about electoral reform, and now suddenly, because he's getting trashed at 2 elections, suddenly he wants to put it on the agenda. This is all of a piece with the Prime Minister treating the nation like fools, expecting us to believe that the Honourable Member for Edinburgh South West is his first choice as Chancellor.
Alistair Dowling.
That he cancelled the election because he was going to win it. The Prime Minister said he had no plans for a referendum. Now, we all know what that means. He said he had no plans to put up taxes in 1997. So instead of saying no plans, let him stand up at that dispatch box and rule out a referendum.
I said I had no plans. I repeat, I have no plans. Mr. Speaker, isn't it again remarkable? What MPs are being told by their constituents is to concentrate on getting the politics of this country sorted out. What they're being told is concentrating on getting us through the recession. What they're being told is build us a better future, and not one question from the Leader of the Opposition can be about the central issues facing our country.
The Prime Minister has chosen today to make a statement about constitutional reform. He can't complain. He can't complain that I'm asking questions about it. And when the Prime Minister talks about the economy, let's be clear what his legacy will be. Not the most useless government we've had in history, though it is. His legacy will be the biggest budget deficit in Europe and the biggest we've had in our history. So let's be clear about this no plans or no proposals today, as he put it. A man with no democratic legitimacy, who's never been elected as our Prime Minister, who's been defeated every time the public have been able to vote for him, is now considering trying to fix the rules of the election before the next general election. Isn't that what's happening?
Mr. Speaker, first of all, on public spending and deficits, let him confirm that his proposals are for a 10% cut in most departmental expenditure. If he wishes to raise the question of deficits and debts, let him confirm that that is now the proposal of the Shadow Chancellor to cut public expenditure by 10%, as confirmed by the Shadow Health Secretary this morning. And let us have a debate about the choice that really does exist in the country between a Conservative Party that now wants to cut even at a time of recession, into our basic public services, and a Labour Party that wants to invest in them. Let him also be honest with the country that when it comes to calling for election, he has absolutely no plan for dealing with the recession. He has got no policies for dealing with unemployment, no policies for dealing with small businesses, no policies for dealing with the problems of this country. He is an opposition leader who has no plans for government, and he doesn't deserve to be in government.
I I had one of my plans for dealing with the recession was the same as the Prime Minister's last week: sack the Chancellor. He might be talking about a second preference voting system. The fact is, he's left with a second preference Chancellor. Now, on the issue of public spending, let's be clear about the answers the Prime Minister has given. He said last week, public spending is rising every year. That is what he said. His Chancellor said, I have cut overall public spending. The figures the Prime Minister is hawking around are his own figures. He is planning to cut public spending by 7% in every department over the next 3 years. The next election, when he has the guts to call it, won't be about Labour investment versus Tory cuts. It's going to be an election about the mismanagement. It's going to be an election about the mismanagement of the public finances, the appalling deficit he's left, and his plan for cuts. But let me just ask him this question. Why not? Why not on the issue of electoral reform? Why not on the issue of electoral reform admit this? The current system gives the country the chance to throw out a government that is weak, that is divided, that is incompetent, and that's what we should be having now.
Mr. Speaker, let me read the figures for public spending so that there is absolutely no doubt about the truth of what I'm saying and that he's got it wrong. Public spending this year is £621 million. It rises next year to £672 million. That's this financial year. Then to 702, then to 717, then to 738, then to 758. That is public spending rises. The only party that's proposing a cut in public spending is the Conservative Party. And he's right. At the next election, there will be a choice. There'll be a choice between a government that helped people and actively intervene to take us through a downturn and a Conservative Party that would do nothing.
Mr. Robertson, you can't behave like that.
Tory Andrew
You're on
Robertson.
the risk of being put out the House. You're on the risk of being put out the House. Everyone's got to be quiet. The Prime Minister.
There'll be a choice between a government that has actually intervened to deal with the recession and a Conservative Party that said do nothing. And it will be the choice now between a government that is increasing public spending by the figures that I've raised and a Conservative leader who, for the first time in the House of Commons during this Parliament, has now admitted that the policy of his party is spending cuts. That is what he's told us today. That is going to be the choice before the country.
Loves this dividing line, says Gordon Brown, so cuts from the Tories, that's what his accusation is.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know you're very anxious to hear this question.
Dem Leader.
Everyone who's been out on the campaign trail in the last few weeks knows how angry and frustrated people have become in the way that this government always raises people's hopes only to see them disappointed again and again. And nowhere is that truer than in housing, where we've had more announcements than new homes. Now, since January, when the Prime Minister announced the biggest council house building programme in decades, only 20 new homes have been started. So will he, for once, just for once, make a promise and actually deliver?
Mr. Speaker, I don't accept his figures. What has happened since January is that we brought in place measures, first of all, to protect people in their own homes. So the expected rate of mortgage repossessions has not happened, and mortgage repossessions are roughly as they were a few months ago. Equally, at the same time, we are bringing in a programme for social housing to invest more in social housing over the next few months and indeed over the next few years. And I have to tell him we are prepared to take even more decisions to make available more social housing over the next few months. Now, that's only possible because we have taken the decisions that his and the Conservative Party have opposed about the increased investment that's necessary at the time of a recession. So I hope if he's going to ask us for more social housing, he'll support the investment that is necessary for it.
Clegg, that's all true. Why are a staggering 1.8 million families in this country waiting for a home? That is 70% more than when this government came into power. Now, if he wants to do something now, why doesn't he stop the Treasury from grabbing all the money that councils raise in rents and sales and allow them to use that money instead to build desperately needed homes? Will he at least do that?
Mr. Speaker, I have to tell him there are 1 million more people in homes than when we came into government government in 1997. We've also improved houses for more than 1 million extra people. At the same time, we are putting aside extra money for social housing. I have to tell them that over 40 billion in total will have been invested on housing since 1997 by 2010, and we'll have made house improvements for 8 million people. We are reducing the number of non-decent social homes by more than 1 million. And I just have to say that since 1997, over 29 billion has been invested in social housing. We are not complacent, and that's why we're planning to invest more this year.
Michael Major.
Since the stated objective of bailing out the banks was to maintain lending to businesses and homeowners at 2007 levels, and since the latest official figures just published show that that lending is now absolutely flat, indeed 20% down on 2007 levels, when will my right honourable friend use the power which he already has from majority ownership of several major banks to force the banks to give priority to rescuing the real economy rather than simply looking after their own interests and letting the real economy hang go?
Mr. Speaker, my right honourable friend is right that the banks have a duty now to lend to small businesses and for housing. Since March the 1st, they've been under an obligation as a result of quantitative agreements we've reached. In other words, they have agreed RBS to increase its lending this year by 25 billion. Lloyds TSB to increase its lending by 14 billion, Northern Rock by 5 billion. Voluntarily, HSBC and Barclays have agreed to increase their lending. The total increase in lending that has agreed to come from March the 1st is 70 billion extra over what happened last year, and you will begin to see the companies that will benefit from that being able to say that where rejections happened before when they put in applications, they are now having their applications accepted. Now, we will continue to monitor this situation, but I assure them that 70 billion more extra money is going into lending to small businesses and to homes.
Sir Robert Smith.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, pension